All morning long, the airwaves here in the UK have been filled with the story of the parish council in Cheshire, up north somewhere. And this particular parish council had a huge row. It was all on Zoom last night, and the Zoom has gone viral. So apparently what happened at this meeting was that everyone got into a real old row. And the nation has found it really, really funny today, and why not? It is hilarious. I've watched the video. But of course I remember out there, across those hills there are parishes all over the place, and when I was a young cub-reporter I used to have to go out into those parishes on dark, wet Tuesday nights or whatever to report on the little parish councils of the hills and dales of West Somerset and Exmoor. And let me tell you, we had some fine old rows there. I remember I could fill a book with some of those stories. Dunster Parish Council was a particular favourite of mine. They always were arguing there. Any other business was a thing to behold. And once I got really ticked off by the chairman for laughing. I mean, I was only 18 and it was all so hilarious. There were two cousins, and they were both parish councillors, and they were called Len and Les, and they seemed to really dislike each other. And never was there in any other business where they wouldn't pick a topic in which they would argue. And the chairman of that parish council at the time was a man who was completely bald, and which, so what? But the funny thing was that he had a huge French poodle who was one of the most hairy, hirsute dogs I've ever seen. Massive thing. And it would sit on a chair next to the bald chairman. And when the two cousins argued, they would sit either side of this table at this ancient medieval parish council chamber, and they would argue, and the old chairman and his dog would be like an umpire at a tennis match. You know, they would be going, and they would be nodding in unison as the argument went on, this way and that way. Of course, looking at them, it was hilarious, and I burst out laughing one night watching this. I got roundly ticked off by the chairman. And so that was that to some extent. They didn't kick me out though. The magistrates did a couple of times, but I burst into giggles during hilarious moments in proceedings over there in a place called Minehead, West Somerset Magistrates Court all those years ago. But the old boys at Dunster Parish Council were far more forgiving, and in fact would always take me across the road to the Lateral Arms for a drink or two or three after the meeting was over, and it was all very jolly. And at the boot bar in the Lateral Arms I'd pick up quite a few stories which I could sell once to the Nationals. I remember a man called Les Griffiths told the parish council about how he'd been to an extension of the graveyard in Dunster, and there'd been a landslide, and another parish councillor started to quiz him and asked him what he did. Well, he said that he had found skulls and bones and things like that on the ground, so he dug them back in. And the other parish councillor, I always remember, looked pretty aghast at this and said, "You're Mr. Griffiths, how do you know you got the right bones down the right holes?" Of course, to which there was no answer. But Mr. Griffiths responded to this by saying, "Why you had to do it, Mr. Chairman, see, because the dogs was running off with the skulls." And I had this vision of Dunster's dogs running around the medieval pavements with skulls and crossbones in their jaws. But it's great really. Out there, as I say, there are these funny little local authorities called parish councils, and And up there, in those hills there's one parish council where they would have a hell of a job going viral on the internet for the Zoom arguments they were having, because I know the only parish councillor there is a friend of mine. He's the chairman and the clerk and the sole parish councillor, so he won't be having too many rows. Other villages and towns were remarkable in the fact they would have lots of arguments and rows with one another. I mean, I know of a town council not far over there where there are town councillors who attend the same meetings and have done so for the past 20 years who've never spoken to one another in 20 years after some wretched argument or another, and that takes a lot of beating. Why it is that some villages and towns have huge argument, bad blood, why that is, when others get along perfectly happily for decades on end, I don't know. I think some sociology student at a university ought to do a PhD. Why are some villages and towns unhappy places, full of angst and anger, while others are jolly and happy? I think I'm lucky enough to live in one of the happy ones, right here in Old Cleve, village of Road, stretching out before us. There's a huge rainstorm about to arrive, so I've got to go.